Hi, I'm Symphoneers, and today we're taking a look at a bunch of cards from Thunder Junction and the big score that I thought were kind of notable, interesting, worth crafting, or were just cards I wanted to talk about. It's just briefly, we're going to be going through them in like a horrible scramble order, all the big score cards first and then stuff, just because of how I built the slideshow this time in OBS and yada yada yada. Anyway, let's get into it. So first up we have Collector's Cage. This is another fight rigging. I don't love these cards because the most efficient way to play them is just like question mark, Italy or Atraxa profit, and it's like, okay. But it is worth mentioning as like, it'll probably be playable. I do see this as kind of a lateral shift to fight rigging, but I do think I prefer Collector's Cage. In particular, the kind of Coven trigger means you don't have to invest all in on one creature, or in a relatively narrow subset of creatures in Standard. You have a lot more flexibility in terms of how you build your deck around Collector's Cage. In addition to that, the timing is a little bit more flexible. You can do Collector's Cage on your opponent's turn, which might be relevant and cool and good, I don't know. Yeah, it does cost mana, which is why I don't consider it like a strict upgrade or whatever, but it's a little bit better in, I don't know, like a fair deck or something. You could use this with a vampire that when it gets a counter on it, draw a card, do it on your opponent's turn. Yeah, I don't know. Probably an okay fair card in just like Selesnya counters or whatever. Moving on, we have Generous Plunderer. This card is a bit weird. I don't particularly like it as a fully fair card or just like a linear threat, because giving your opponent treasures and stuff, not great. I do like it a lot more if you are playing like Boros and Get Lost or something, which gives your opponent 2 map tokens. And, I don't know, maybe that weird spider that gives your opponent a Power Stone. If you are kind of building around Generous Plunderer to make sure that it domes the opponent for 3, 4, or 5 damage whenever it attacks, that's much more interesting to me, much more compelling. And yeah, in Eternal formats, maybe worth mentioning, it's a lot better versus like, it's a hate piece for Dockside Extortionist, sort of, and Moxen, and so on. So yeah, pretty good in older formats. For Standard, which is kind of the focus of this video, I like it as kind of a build around. I wouldn't say it's like a high priority craft or anything, but kind of interesting. Next up we have Vaultborn Tyrant. Boy, this thing is goofy. Yeah, in particular, I like this just as a big removal resilient threat that doesn't require weird kind of blowout stuff. In particular, I'm thinking of Titan of Industry and how there can be awkward tension points in terms of like, do you get the shield counter? What do you put the shield counter on? Vaultborn Tyrant just gives you a bunch of that upside, but you don't actually have to like decide between various options, and it can be a kind of engine piece in its own right with a power 4 or greater thing. So yeah, that's nice. It's a very good green top-end threat. Looking forward to it. Probably one of the better crafts as far as like goofy big mythic cards goes. Also, coming up in the big score, we have Nexus of Becoming. This is a vaguely silly artifact top-end payoff that I think will be very strong. I'm not even going to spend that much time talking about it because the reasons I think it's going to be very strong we haven't covered yet. But just keep this in mind as like a thing that is additional card advantage and can give you additional golem tokens that are the thing. We also are getting in the big score Sword of Wealth and Power. This is, I think, one of the best standard legal swords just because of how prevalent removal is. Yeah, the protection from instants and sorceries, great, tremendous. You love to see it. The, like, treasure and copying stuff, I'm kind of into it, but the protection effect is the main reason why I think this sword is, like, pretty cool and good. It's maybe Hearth and Home is pretty good as well. Am I saying the right one? The red-green one. Forge and Frontier, that we have in Standard, that is also a solid sword. I would say Wealth and Power is similar to that in terms of power level. Better protection, maybe worse hit, or like combat damage effect. Also, we're getting Torpor Orb, worth a shout out mainly as a, like, 1 or 2 of good craft for the sideboard type of thing if you're into best of 3. Yeah, good hate piece for Standard. Fomori Vault, also just a good artifacts deck land. You can, yeah, toss a land or whatever, look at the top couple cards of your library, which is your affinity for artifacts, or X equals that number, put a thing into your hand. Artifacts-focused decks in Standard right now will be able to pretty easily maintain 3, 5, even 7 artifacts on the battlefield, like just in non-creatures and stuff. So Fomori Vault, very solid, like quite powerful land that can help those decks when they're flooding or whatever. So if you're into those decks, very good craft, at least, I don't know, 2 of you can probably play 4 of them. Yeah. 2 to 4, shrug. Here is the big thing. Simulacrum Synthesizer, 2 and a blue when it ETBs Scry 2. Whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. It's a construct printer. So the first one is not incredible, but after you play that first one, you can play, say, a Thousand Moon Smithy, and you get you get a construct and you get the Smithy's improved construct, and you have 2, how did the math work out, 4/4 or 5/5 minimum artifact creatures with dynamic sizing that can get even bigger. Or if you play subsequent Simulacrum Synthesizers, they just, keep spitting out more and more constructs. You're unlikely to accelerate in a way early game that's really good on turn 3 or whatever, but you could play out Craig or some Moonsnare prototype or whatever on your early turns in an artifact stack. Play this on 3. On turn 4, you have enough mana to play out like a Mightstone and Weakstone, kill their Shieldred, make a construct. You have additional mana from the, long story short, or all this kind of rambling about play patterns summed up, this card's extremely strong. It is the best card in probably either set, in my opinion, certainly in the contention for being the strongest, best card in either set. This card is gross. Or like artifacts decks can already go big in a pretty solid way. They have maybe been missing like a mid-cost threat or something that will just help them produce more and more constructs for executing their game plan, which is like, it's great. This card powers up artifacts a lot. It's good, you can craft it, etc., etc. Oh, we're into actual Thunder Junction cards. Vault Plunderer, just a common. I wanted to shout this card out because it is pretty close to being like a Spirited Companion, or we've had this effect in Black once or twice, which is like the Elvish Visionary draw a card thing, but you also lose a life. Usually those are 2 mana 1/1s. Here we have a 3 mana 3/1 with that effect. And this is, I will say, bare minimum, a great budget card. These type of cards tend to overperform or be better than you would think, and getting an additional 2 points of power for that 1 more mana is pretty reasonable. So you can just slam like a full playset of these in any black deck, and they are going to be at least decent, at least fine. They can trade with Graveyard Trespassers or whatever, and yeah. Never going to be a super spectacular card, but this is like a good workhorse common that you can craft if you're a budget player or whatever, and, be happy with. A Brimstone Roundup, 1 and a red for a It's sort of a young pyromancer effect. It's not quite a young pyromancer effect because it's looking for second spell casts to produce the mercenary creature token. But it is pretty close. The big benefit to Brimstone Roundup as compared to Young Pyromancer or Third Path Iconoclast or whatever, like creature token generators that play off of spellcasts or whatever, it works. Or one, it's not a creature, so, you know, it doesn't just eat removal instantly. Yay! Two, it works with any spell, so you don't actually have to just play like instants and sorceries like you do with Young Pyromancer. Third Path Iconoclast is a bit more flexible, or it's a kind of non-creature spell thing. Brimstone Roundup will just work with creatures and stuff too, which might be relevant for like Naya tokens or something. Anyway, worth shouting out is just kind of like a build enabling, or at least very solid uncommon. Oh, Calamity. I don't know if Calamity will be great. However, I do think Calamity, we've seen a couple of these kind of clone effects in Red in Standard before, but they've been awful. They've been like Orth something Lava Brink Hero or whatever, and it's like pay 8 mana, create a bunch of copies of a thing. Whee! We're memeing. I think Calamity, by comparison, is much more efficient or effective. Even if you are just copying like a Spirited Companion or something, make 2 1/1s, draw 2 cards or whatever, that's pretty reasonable. It's maybe not the A plan, like it's not the thing you're hoping to do. There are certainly better things you can copy at 3 mana, 5 mana, copy a Titan of Industry or whatever, you get the idea. But yeah, as a kind of floor, being able to play facilitating cards, or even just like, hey, you can play a Vault Plunderer in a Calamity deck, and to copy the Vault Plunderers, have 2 3/1s that draw you 2 cards. Base level, I think it's, yeah, more efficient, more fun, whatever. Seems like a good horse. Moving on to Cunning Coyote. I don't know why I said it like this. I like the Coyote as kind of a budget red mention, just because 2/2 haste. We've seen in kind of the odd mono-red deck here or there, Red Herring, the artifact clue fish from MKM, being actually just kind of playable. It's like baseline 2/2 haste is the Bloodthirsty Adversary stat line, and that is pretty decent. Bloodthirsty Adversaries will just kill people. Then in addition to that, you have the +1/+1 when it ETBs, and the ability to plot it in case you're like afraid of a sweeper or whatever, you need to trigger your Brimstone Roundup or something, and it makes it a little bit easier to do that. Yeah. Long story short, good Coyote. I do think it's better than the Roadrunner, which has a similar stat line for Standard, just because of the ETB. The Roadrunner has like kind of nonsense or protection from its memeing. But yeah, the Coyote, I think, despite the memes, actually fun, like actually reasonably solid. Great Train Heist is our first spree spell that we're covering. And I just think it's flexible. I think a lot of the spree cards get a lot of points for their flexibility, and in particular that flexibility without being wildly expensive. Like if you're doing a token strategy or whatever, the bottom mode letting you generate a bunch of treasure tokens from hitting your opponent with a bunch of 1/1s or whatever, that's kind of neat on its own. And if you are using the 3 into red mode to get an extra combat phase or whatever, cool. It's a nice kind of sort of extra turn thing. For mono red, an extra combo step is loosely equivalent asterisk 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 to an extra turn. So yeah, having that effect that can also just like pump and generate treasures and so on, seems neat. Seems worth investigating, at least. Also, in red, we have Highway Robbery. You may discard a card or sacrifice a land. If you do, draw 2 cards, and you can also plot Highway Robbery. I mostly wanted to shout this out as a combo card, just because, like, being able to convert lands into card advantage is something that tends to be very good for like storm decks or whatever. I don't know if we'll quite get there with this set, but like Crime Novelist in Standard can be an interesting kind of combo piece. We are getting the Meteorite Cat Druid, whatever. I don't think she's in Roxanne? I think it's Roxanne. She's not in the slideshow, I'm pretty sure, but like Crime Novelist plus Roxanne, Highway Robbery, something something, kill people with the giant fireball, I don't know. But yeah, just anything that's like a draw 2 for 2, pretty good. Frontier Seeker is just a nice, ambitious farmhand glow up, or yeah. It can be quite solid card advantage in a mount deck. I don't even think you need the mount text for it to be good. Just 2-1 that grabs you a plains or whatever is nice. It's not a basic plains either. You can play these scry duels and they'll do stuff. So that's handy. Yeah. Restless Lackey, back into red now. 1/2 first strike haste. It's a good goblin. It's a good goblin, and there's the activated ability, card draw, treasure token, etc. These are just another kind of good budget card in particular. I would flag them as a good budget card. First strike haste is pretty good at carrying equipment. So if you wanted to try like building that sword, give your goblin a sword, etc., etc., that's nice. It is also just a goblin pirate, which are 2 very good creature typings for pirates in Standard. Do older goblin decks want this? I haven't actually thought about that before. Probably, or like it's workable. It seems decent, if only because of the activated ability. So yeah, Restless Lackey, very reasonable goblin, just solid workhorse common. Oh, this is also one of the strongest cards of the set, I think. A Return the Favor, I'm fairly high on. Instant with Spree that can either copy an instant spell, sorcery spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. You may choose new targets for this copy, and then for another mana, you can also change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. So you can 3 for 1, is it? If your opponent plays like Go for the Throat or whatever, let's redirect that to their Shieldred, and also copy it, and kill something else of theirs. So like, that's cool and good. There's also weirder situations that this can be decent in like, if you're playing versus Esper Legends, when the Rafine trigger goes on the stack, you can steal it, put it onto one of your creatures, copy it, put it on another creature. The way Rafine's trigger is worded doesn't care about who's attacking, which normally isn't relevant because you can't attack during someone else's attack step and so on. But yeah, you will still get the Rafine Connive on your creatures instead of theirs, and that will presumably make them much better at blocking. Maybe you can block Rafine or whatever, and I don't know, that's kind of cool. You can steal Shieldred triggers or something. That's probably not going to be amazing, but you know. Or actually, no, you can't, because they're not targeted. I'm rambling now anyway, but yeah, Return the Favor as a, like, counter spells. Also, god, countering stuff with this card is wild. That is probably worth talking about. So you can get 2 counter spells out of Return the Favor, sort of. You have played something, your opponent has countered it. Oh god, this is difficult to walk through. For the ease of talking about this, you can change the target of a counterspell to target Return the Favor. You can also copy that counterspell to counter something else. Return the Favor will resolve before counterspells lower on the stack. So even though you've changed the target of a counterspell to Return the Favor, it will still cause that counterspell to fizzle, because Return the Favor will no longer be on the stack by the time that counterspell is resolving. So you can get 2 counterspells out of Return the Favor. It's complicated. But yeah, it just has a lot of weird stuff it can do, in short, and I think that's neat. Next up, Scorching Shot. Mono Red finally has a not embarrassing way to deal with Shieldred. Woo! I don't think it's going to matter that much, if I'm honest. Like, I don't think this affects Shieldred's play percentage or win rate or whatever, but it's nice to have. It's a solid option. Yeah, generally Burn wants to be playing burn spells that can hit any target, which is to say go face and, you know, kill your opponent. But if you are not doing that, sorcery speed, deal 5 for 2, pretty solid, pretty reasonable. I think this immediately replaces, is it Witch Stalker's Frenzy or whatever, in pretty much any standard deck. I don't think the instant speed timing on that is worth the fact that it can cost 4 mana or whatever. So yeah, Scorching Shot, decent. Slick Shot, Show Off. It's a prowess flying haste. Woo! Technically not prowess, it's, you know, 2/0 per non-creature spell, but that's just very good, and I'm excited for it in mono red. The plotting can be helpful for playing around sweepers or whatever. It can help you trigger double spell stuff. Yeah, it's a good bird. Probably one of the safest crafts of the set, if you enjoy mono red or whatever. Stingerback Terror, interesting dragon. I mostly wanted to include it because mono red has not actually had that many ways to play a big thing, and hey look, it's a big thing that doesn't cost a ton. You do have to build your deck around it, at least to some extent. Like, you can plot it for 3, maybe you play some cantrips or whatever on your turn 4 and the free Stingerback Terror, or, sorry, not cantrips or whatever, but like burn spells or something, or you can play Case of the Crimson Pulse, discard your hand down, exile some new cards and stuff. This works really well with exile draw because those cards aren't in your hand. Yeah, I think this is frequently just going to be, I don't know, 4/4 trample or something, flying trample, but the 4/4 flying trample for 3, not bad, better than Atsushi. It's an interesting dragon. Oh yeah, Terror of the Peaks. If you haven't played with Terror of the Peaks, play with Terror of the Peaks. It's ridiculous. It is certainly the best dragon that was has been printed into standard during my time playing. Probably the best one that will be printed into standard. Kind of end of sentence. It's a really good dragon. Yeah, just being able to convert creature ETBs into burn spells, thumbs up. Oh yeah, good dragon. Into green, sort of, we have Alo Alchemist. Trample, a 3/2 trample for 2, with when it becomes plotted, target creature gets 3/2 and gains trample until end of turn. Imagine if your Mosswood Dread Knight came with a pump ability instead of a card advantage spell that didn't force you to play black and could help you push damage in decks that are short on trample. I'm thinking of a Flourishing Bloomkin or whatever, which is, I think, one of the best creatures in green right now for mono green, but critically does not have trample. So this can help solve that problem and also just be a 3/2 trample for 2. The plot ability, plotting, worth noting, is, I believe it's a special action. I might be wrong on that, but it's not counterable under most normal circumstances anyway. So yeah, you can just kind of do that and not risk getting countered, and that's nice. I think it is a very solid green 2-drop that people might overlook just because, I don't know, it's pretty unassuming in the context of current standard, but yeah, just a kind of a Dread Knight that mono green can play instead of green-black or Golgari. That is nice. I like it. I enjoy a plant Warlock. Bristly Bill Spine Sower. It's a Luminarch Aspirant. Woo! Not as good as Luminarch Aspirant, and it's a mythic, but hey, it's Luminarch Aspirant adjacent, and those, like, cards that are that type of card are very solid consistently. So yeah, play some Bristly Bill. You can pair them with fetch lands to try to get more counters per turn or whatever. Like, there's additional ways to play around the landfall, or like to support the landfall and so on. But doing none of that legwork, ignoring the activated ability, I still think it's a very good creature, or like a very solid 2-drop. Oh yeah, one of the other big gets for mono green, the set Colossal Rattleworm. It has flash as long as you control a desert. The slideshow will not have any lands, because that's boring. The big thing that I think this needed to be playable was untapped deserts that were half decent, and we have those. We have one that surveils on ETB. We have a tapped desert that I still think is decent. A bounce desert, taps for 2 colorless, ETB's taps, returns another land to hand. I think that desert is playable in at least some decks, and we have like 1 or 2 other untapped deserts that I don't remember offhand. The long story short is a mono green deck will be able to play 4 or 6 deserts. I think playing like 2 tap deserts in mono green or something is acceptable, and those are going to give you a very consistent uptime on the flash for Rattleworm, which I think it needs to be good and playable. But once you have that, it is just a 6/5 trample that you can flash in, and that's going to ruin some people's days, so, you know, that's nice. And then, aside from that, you also have the thing that lets you ramp for 2 mana, so that's pretty cool and good. You can also theoretically just build around that more aggressively in like a self-mill strategy or something, so that's kind of a cool angle. But yeah, just as big flash worm, I think it's solid. One of the better green crafts this set. Outcaster Greenblade. Speaking of green cards that I think most people are going to miss, or like overlook for constructed play, I mentioned Flourishing Bloomkin being one of the strongest creatures in green because it can just be a 2 mana 10/10 or something. It gets +1/+1 for every forest you control. Outcaster Greenblade has very similar templating, only it cares about deserts. So it does conflict a little bit with what the Bloomkin wants. I don't believe we have any desert forests or whatever, but I don't even think you need that many deserts for Greenblade to just be a very decent kind of ambitious farmhand type effect. In particular, or like in general, I think if you can get 2 or 3 deserts down, and Greenblade is a 3/4 or 4/5 that just gives you card advantage in the form of fetching lands, pretty good. I would be pretty happy with that. And yeah, very solid green threat in this set. Outcaster Trailblazer. 2 and a green. When it ETBs, add 1 mana of any color. Whenever another creature with power 4 or greater ETBs, draw a card. I like this just as being kind of an engine card for green. One of the big issues with playing green in general is that it doesn't have the automatic 3-for-1s of black or whatever, which means it has a very hard time being competitively viable in Standard. You can build around like Tribute to the World Tree or whatever to help give your deck some resilience in those matchups, but it is rough and shaky. Trailblazer is really nice on that front in that it is just a threat that can help generate that card advantage. Good with the Rattleworm, good with your Flourishing Bloomkins that are 10/10s, etc., etc. There's some combo potential with the Adamana thing. I haven't worked out that combo. The plot is also just nice for flexibility and stuff. The fact it's 2 toughness is not ideal. It trades with kind of anything, so that's one thing I'm not super jazzed about. But just as like a advantage engine that can attack, not too shabby. Yeah, dying to play with fire. But other than that, it's a good druid. Into white, we have Nurturing Pixie, a core Skyfisher that is a 1/1 flyer. It can return things to your hand to get a 1/1 counter on it. This is more flexible than core Skyfisher, which is nice. It's cheaper. Lower stats, technically, but it also costs less. I might have already said that, whatever. In Standard, I like this booting like Experimental Synthesizer back to hand. In Boros, replay Experimental Synthesizer, get more card advantage. You can replay other creatures to give them kind of pseudo prowess, or not prowess, sorry, vigilance. And that might be nice. There's a lot of potential ways to leverage the effect for value, so that's good. And then baseline 1/1 flying, like okay keyword and so on, but yeah, you are aiming to do the counters thing. You can play this with Spirited Companion, boot the dog back to your hand, replay Spirited Companion, draw another card. Yeah, It's not like a super flashy card or anything, but for just dirtly value, it's a good Pixie. Oh, Honest Rutstein, one of the only 2-color legends to make it on here, because most of them are really bad commander cards. Rutstein can Eternal Witness a creature, or like kind of Gravedigger a creature back to hand, and also just creature spells cost 1 less. That kind of ramp and resiliency, that pair of things, really good. Not a lot more to say about that, so, you know. This thing. 5 mana draw 3 that can also just let you play an Atraxa for free, or an Atali for free, or whatever. That's what I would assume is the most competitive thing of application of Make Your Own Luck. There's presumably other fun things you could do with it, but yeah, for standard, I would expect that to be them. You might want to pair it with something that manipulates the top of your deck in order to actually do that combo. But I don't think you need to. Personally, I think you can just play like Simic Ramp, and hey, occasionally it's going to let you play 7 mana of creature for free, or whatever, or, I don't know, play an extra turn spell, or a wheel, or something. Yeah, this card seems gross to me. Malcolm, one of the other few legends that got into this video. Malcolm, 2/2 flying haste. Thumbs up. Pretty good, Malcolm. That is already, like a lightning elemental or whatever from that one Ravnica that was okay. But on top of that, whenever you cast your second spell, investigate, so just more card advantage and artifact generation in Izzet. Yeah, I think that Malcolm is just like a clean, elegant, playable 2-drop. It's nice. Slick Sequence, a big get for Izzet, this set, or any kind of like spell-slingy deck. Deal 2 to any target. If you cast another spell this turn, draw a card, so Izzet can like play with fire something, Slick Sequence to kill that thing, or maybe it's all going face or whatever, draw a card, and so on. It's just a nice, clean bit of card advantage and damage and stuff that I expect to see a fair amount of play. We don't really have a strong or super strong Izzet deck in Standard right now, but this is the type of support piece that I think really helps those decks come together. Especially when the creatures are kind of struggling to, you know, not die to Doomblades or Sweepers or whatever. Having a thing that can just draw you more cards, get more burn in hand to, you know, close out the final points of damage on an opponent or something. Pretty good. Lava Spur Boots, just worth briefly mentioning in like, hey, you know that artifact deck that's spitting out a bunch of constructs I mentioned? What if those constructs had haste and ward? Seems nice. I wouldn't put a ton of boots in that deck, but, you know, playing one or 2 pairs of boots, probably just one. Yeah, seems maybe interesting, good little bit of utility. Similarly, you could put it in just like a mono green deck playing that Vault Forged Tyrant or whatever. Give that thing haste pretty easily. Yeah, it is a pretty solid version of like cheap haste equipment. We haven't had any in Standard for a little while now, if I'm not mistaken. And it's never like a huge deal, but it can be a nice little bit of utility for certain decks. Also, Archmage's Noot. Don't overthink this one. If this is just getting back a Consider or a Doomblade or like a Go for the Throat or something, great, you're gaming. You don't need to do a goofy combo or anything. It's just a 2/2 for 2 that can occasionally snapcast or something. And yeah, it's a good Noot. Aven Interrupter, yeah. This is what I meant about the order being a weird scramble. This bird is great. Yeah, 2/2 flash flying that can also just exile things off the stack, plot them for the opponent. Or, yeah, not necessarily for the opponent, which is worth shouting out. And then spells your opponent casts from graveyards or from exile cost 2 more to cast. So, flash timing on this is great. The frequent application is going to be like tempoing out your opponent. And bouncing their spells back on into exile and delaying things and etc. So that's good. Options for this are like, if your opponent is countering one of your spells, you can just play out an Aven Interrupter targeting your own spell to get it back into, I guess, into plot or like exile for you, but you still keep it. You still retain that value, and that might be helpful or whatever. This card, very good. One of the strongest crafts in the set, I think, especially if you are a fan of tempo things or like death and taxes. This pairs well with Thalia or whatever. Delay your opponents with cost increases, and then when they do finally cast something, even interrupt it, and yeah. Solid bird. Double down. This is like, what if that zombie copy enchantment was actually good? Which is to say, it's a mana cheaper and works with way more things. I think this is actually, yeah, very solid, or like very standard playable. One of the better mythics on that front. For standard, I see mostly like pirates as being the big beneficiary, because even something as small as like duplicating that 1-drop siren that spits out a map token, like having 2 1/1 flyers and 2 artifact ETPs and stuff, that's pretty solid. And then if you have like a Captain Storm out, that's 2 more triggers off of Captain Storm, or like an additional trigger for Captain Storm that can put a counter on something or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't work really well with breaches or whatever. There's that 2-drop that can grab another pirate out of your deck, so getting 2 pirates out of your deck, that's nice. You can keep going down the list on that front. That's not to say I don't think there are other options for building around this. A lot of incidental things are rogues or warlocks. But yeah, pirates are the kind of thing that we know is constructed playable more or less as is. I would say it's tier 2. I don't know if Double Down makes it tier 1, but it certainly gives it another interesting kind of build around option. Might discourage some of the legendaries and push the pirates deck into being more of a value oriented pile, which, yeah, it's interesting. Duelist of the Mind. It's another ledger shredder. It's gonna kill people. Woo! Yeah, Flying Vigilance, it's frequently going to be a 2/3 or 3/3. It doesn't retain the power boost across turns in the way that Ledger Shredder can, and that's like a little bit awkward, but just being able to like do the commit a crime thing on your turn and your opponent's turn and stuff, it's redundancy for Ledger Shredder. Like, it's similar power level, better in some situations, worse in others, etc., etc. Yeah, it's nice. Blue tempo decks, or like blue-white tempo, can play this Ledger Shredder, the Aven Interrupter, etc. Blue-white tempo doing well this set, which is fun. Phantom Interference. This is a gross make disappear. By which I mean it is frequently just going to be a make disappear or a quench in a lot of situations of like a soft counter unless they pay to. But hey, it can also spit out a 2/2 white spirit creature token with flying. And that gives oops all counters or whatever a lot more ability to just focus on playing counter spells and not actually have to play threats. Which I don't love personally, but it is worth highlighting that like this is a really good quench. Yeah, often, like if you're countering a Shieldred or something as the mono blue player, just being able to dump 3 extra mana into the counter you're playing and to get a body, it's great. It is, like, that is very similar to a Frilled Mystic or something, and you don't even have to commit to playing, like, double green pips, the way you do with Frilled Mystic. It's 1 mana more expensive, but more flexible, and etc. So, yeah. Phantom Interference, solid kind of quench. Plan the Heist. 2 a blue and a blue for a draw 3. It's just efficient. If you want to do a spell slingy deck or whatever, it's solid. It has like plot and surveil 3 and stuff. I think that's overcomplicating things a little bit, or I think people tend to undervalue just like raw card draw. Because raw card draw is going to get you, like, a land into hand as well as more spells, and then you can play out the land and use the fact that you've been playing a land every turn from your raw card draw to double spell or triple spell, and yeah, I think Plan the Heist is certainly worth investigating as just, like, pure bulk card advantage for Standard. In a very similar vein, Seize the Secrets, 2 and a blue for Divination, draw 2 cards. but it can also just cost 2 mana if you commit a crime. Divination on its own is a kind of underrated or like a better than people think magic card. So having one of those that can just cost 2 mana if, like, say you're playing Dimir and you cut down something and then seize the secrets for 2, or you're playing Izzet, play with fire something and then seize the secrets for 2. Like, that is a really good turn 3 for you as those decks. So yeah, try out Seize the Secrets. It's a common, costs nothing, and is, yeah, very decent. Slick Shot Lockpicker, another kind of Snapcaster Mage type card. We actually have a few of these in Standard. My favorite, or the one that I think is the strongest, is Arcane Proxy. But Slick Shot Lockpicker, worth shouting out just as a, like, uncommon Snapcaster. It can't do counter spells or whatever, which is one of the big things with actual Snapcaster Mage, but it has 2 more points of toughness, and you can just, like, replay Go for the Throat or something, or replay Seize the Secrets or whatever, and, you know, it's great. It's another card that you don't really need to overthink. It's solid, kind of generic advantages, especially if you're comfortable working at sorcery speed. 3 Steps Ahead, just a kind of bizarre card. The frequent use case for this, I think, is just going to be the cancel mode, the pay 2 more mana to counter target spell. But it can also draw 2 cards and then discard a card for 2 mana, or you can create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control for an additional 3 mana. Yeah, one of the better counters in Standard, I think, just by virtue of being able to shift between being a kind of like cancel, which is not great, but workable, sort of, like that as a floor, and then being able to scale up into this sort of Sublime Epiphany type, like, multi-mode counterspell. That gives it, I think, a lot of play or a lot of potential to help out Oops All Counters decks or whatever. It's a solid one. Back to white for whatever reason. I don't know why OBS, the slideshow thing, organized them this way, but anyway, Claim Jumper. Initially, I wasn't terribly high on this card, but then that Bounce Desert came out, or it was pointed out to me that, like, hey, you can use that Bounce Desert to put yourself down on lands, and then that helps make Claim Jumper consistently ramp you and stuff. And it's nice. Claim Jumper also does not specify basic planes, so you can grab Surveil lands or whatever and put them onto the battlefield. That's nice. It's kind of, yeah, I think it's just a baseline efficient white card that in, like, any white value deck, playing, I don't know, even just 2 or 3 Claim Jumpers and some of those Bounce Deserts is going to give you a nice kind of soft ramp or, like, catch-up effect that I think is very just solid and playable. It's a 3/3 Vigilance for 3/2, which is just like an okay base rate. The other big thing that has that stat line in Standard is that Tax Priest, that thing that can, like, make spells in their hand cost 2 more. I kind of like Claim Jumper more than that, because Claim Jumper has just a clean ETB, whereas that Priest requires staying on the battlefield to be effective, or, like, to kind of matter and restrict what your opponent can do. So just more value, or, like, more power up front. They don't stack terribly well, which is why I say 2 or 3. Like, once you get 1 full value Claim Jumper, unless you fall behind again, and, like, need to play catch up again in a really long game, the second one's not going to be great, but yeah. Just playing a few, I think, very solid. The Conco, the Snorse that Bob's wrong. Just aside from being a funny card, or, like, it's just decent. Play this in mono black aggro or whatever. I don't think you need to be terribly concerned about saddling it. In any, like, nice, efficient, aggressive deck, this is just a good source of raw card advantage. Yeah, it's a good snick. Desert Stew, unironically one of my favorite cards in the set just because of the flavor text. He was glad when the mirages appeared. At least he wouldn't die alone. This is one of the only cards in the set that feels like an actual kind of Wild West card to me. in a good or like evocative way. So, you know, thumbs up Desert Stew. You're trying your best to carry this god-awful set on your back. No, sorry. Yeah, I still stick with my prior video on OTJ of just like, anyway, not being too negative or like getting back on track. -2/-2 until end of turn on its own is like okay-ish. Virtue is a -3/-3, and this can match Virtue if you're playing any deserts, and I think mono black or any deck that's not like a 3-color deck can play, I don't know, 4 deserts pretty trivially, and then that will help make this like a -3/-3 or -4/-4 or whatever. And, you know, if this is killing a Shieldred or something, like you're playing 5 or 6 deserts and it's regularly getting to -5/-5, it becomes one of the best Doomblades or like one of the best 2-mana removal spells in Standard, being able to punch through Indestructible or whatever. And yeah, it's just solid. Desert Stew, decent mono black card. Forsaken Miner, a single black pip for a 2/2. It can't block, but whenever you commit a crime, you may pay a black to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. Very good mono black aggro card, of a type that we haven't had in Standard for a while, or of a kind of quality level that we haven't had in Standard for a while. I don't think you need to overthink the typing or whatever. Like, this might end up being a good support piece for, is it Corpses of the Lost or whatever, the 3-mana Ixalan enchantment that gives skeletons +1/+0 and haste. It might pair well with that, but also I think you can just play this with like underdog removal spells, mono black value pile dot deck, and it's going to be probably a better 1-drop than even Evolving Sleeper, Evolved Sleeper, whatever that overplayed card's name is. I still don't think that card is very good, and yeah, Forsaken Miner, play this over that. It's going to give you more resilience to removal, more ability to punch through opponents' board states, and so on. You can play Sleeper if you want to. I don't think it's actually tremendous. Dust Animus, 2/3 flyer for 2. Woo! That rate alone, pretty solid, especially for mono white. Mono white has sort of been missing solid, just like efficient 2-drops, so having another option on that front is nice. And then the fact that it can enter as a 4/4 flying, or pardon me, 4/5 flying lifelink. Very nice. The plotting to worth flagging helps you actually meet the 5 untapped lands clause. So there might just be like a turn 4 or something where you top deck this and go like, I am going to plot this, remove one of their things, and then my turn 5 is going to be, you know, amped up Dust Animus and something else, because you have 5 mana open to do stuff with. Yeah, it very just kind of efficient beater 2-drop, decent top deck, which is always a good thing for a 2-drop to be. So yeah, that's nice. Dust Animus, pretty good. Hollow Marauder, 4/2 Spectre Rogue. This is a self-mill payoff. It has kind of the Plague Crafter, not a Plague Crafter clause specifically, but it'll make your opponent discard, and if they don't, discard a mana value 4 or greater, draw a card. If you can, like, self-mill and play this for 1 or 2 mana, thumbs up. I think this is a better self-mill threat than most cards in Standard. Like, most of the Goyfs and things that we have don't have evasion or whatever, so while this does not have the, like, power and toughness ceiling of those cards, I think just the fact that this is flying and kind of affects card advantage and stuff more directly than those cards makes it a notable or, like, worthwhile potential build-around for that type of deck. The card that I hope finally gets Shieldred banned. So Insatiable Avarice, big Sign in Blood in a lot of cases. Just going to be a 3-mana, draw 3, lose 3. I say the card that I hope gets Shieldred banned because with a Shieldred out, this is a 3-mana deal 9 to your opponent, which, gross. If you're playing this on turn 5 or whatever as a black deck, you've probably already been hitting your opponent a little bit, you know, affecting their life total, and this might just kill them, like, And yeah, it's also just a card that I think you'll want to play anyway, because aside from being a big sign-in blood, it's big sign-in blood that can also just like, hey, is the game gone to turn 5? Why not, you know, demonic tutor effectively and get 2 cards on top of that for 5 mana. Insatiable Avarice, just very good, very generically powerful card, I think. Yeah, even if you're not doing the shielded thing, very solid card. Just being able to hit people for 3 even and to close out games that way, is nice. Lively Dirge. Isn't it nice that they reprint Shieldred every other set? I'm sure this can get other stuff, but yeah. Just entomb and dig up a Shieldred. You could put some, like, underdogs in the graveyard to get some underdogs, which is actually, like, a decent play pattern too, so I don't know, seems strong. I think this is going to be better than Beseech the Mirror, is it? In a lot of cases, because it doesn't require you bargain or anything. It just tutors and, like, does the entomb thing and etc. So, yeah, Lively Dirge, strong card. Nezumi Linkbreaker, this is a really good Aristocrats card because it's a 1/1 that turns into another 1/1. That 1/1 has an ability, but that's probably not going to be very relevant in an Aristocrats deck. It is mostly important for... Oh, did I not put the Motley Crew in the slideshow? Okay. Whoops, that's a mistake on my part, I think. There is a new Bastion of Remembrance in Standard that works with Outlaws. Which is to say that whenever an outlaw you control dies, deal 1 to your opponent, gain 1 life. This is a Warlock that dies into a Mercenary. Both of those are Outlaws, so they both work with that card. So you can play like a Village Rites or whatever, like a sack this, draw some cards effect. That'll ping them for damage, give you new body that you can use to chump block, and that'll ping them for damage, and so on. This is unironically one of the best Aristocrats cards that we've gotten in Standard in some time, so that's neat. That's something that Black can do that isn't just playing mono 3 for once. And yeah, that is all of the cards that I felt were worth talking about or interesting or that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, there's probably some of the Commander-focused cards that might be good enough for Standard, but I didn't really wanna. I didn't want to talk about just like some weird potential edge case that might be playable or whatever, because this video is already too long. And yeah, if you like the video, like, subscribe, etc. helps the channel a lot. Consider supporting me on Patreon. I've had a couple people drop over the past months just because of, like, their financial situation or whatever, which, like, no disrespect or whatever. Happy to get any support folks can give for as long as they can give it. But yeah, that has made me go a little like, So if you've been kind of dragging your feet or whatever on supporting on Patreon, I could use it. Thanks. I think that's basically everything. Follow me on Twitch, give me your Amazon Primes, etc. I don't... what about Twitter? Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching the video, and an extra big thank you to the Patreon patrons and YouTube members that help make these videos possible. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.